Good evening, or should I say, good day. Today we are taking a trip down under. And not to hell, to heaven. Tropical heaven. We're going to be inspired by a man who has a moustache. He has a mullet. He's Tiger King. It's not Tiger King, it's LUUDE. There it is. Let's have a little listen from the beginning, shall we, and see what is happening.
I see the night, I like the start, laying in the dark, where we could be loved. Follow the sound of my heart, and just one more time, where we could be loved. It's a quarter to three, I'm caught unless you're leaving. From technical dreaming, I just want you to know. It's a quarter to three, I'm caught unless you're leaving. From technical dreaming, I just want you to know. I see the night, I like the start, laying in the dark, where we could be loved. Follow the sound of my heart, and just one more time, where we could be loved. I see the night, I like the start, laying in the dark, where we could be loved. Follow the sound of my heart, and just one more time, where we could be loved, where we could be loved.
Beautiful. Right, let's break it down and see what's happening. First off, the rip of this a cappella is very messy. There's a lot of artifacts in it. The reverb is really loud. And I think because it's group vocals, AI doesn't like it so much. So I do apologise for that. So from the beginning. So we're straight in with the hats from the beginning of the song. I used about 4 of LUUDE's songs as a reference when I was making this tune. And he introduces energy really well using hats straight from the start of a lot of his tunes. So we've done a similar thing here. So we're starting off with 4 different hats. One just as a downbeat, another one playing the 16ths. Slightly pan to the left. And just to make it feel a little bit more human, the first notes are a higher velocity than the 3 afterwards. And we've just changed the length of the notes a little bit as well. So each of these velocities are slightly different, just to make it feel like it's a little bit more natural. And we've added a snap as well on those downbeat of the hats. And a live hat as well. So it gives it that nice human feel. And then we've got a little percussion feel in there as well, which is another thing I noticed LUUDE does. It just adds a little bit of spice, so you don't have this same hat loop happening again and again. And I've got a lot of reverb on there, just to add to the ambience. One more time, yeah, we could be loved. It's a quarter to 3. And as usual, that is being sent to a drum room, and the drum room is louder in this intro. So without that drum room, it feels just a little bit lifeless. Just helps it glue all of these hats together and make it sound like it's being played in a live environment. And going straight into a Reese. We're in C minor, so we're playing the C, the G sharp, and then back down to the G sharp. So we're playing the 1, the 5, the 6, and then the 6 again. And that Reese is actually a patch I found. I think it's a house Reese. And we are just automating the cutoff as well. So we're just opening it up slightly as time goes on. Up a little bit into the next section, and then up more gradually into the next bit. Bit of movement, a bit of tension, lovely. And I noticed that especially in the Land Down Under song, he's using a lot of flutes in his songs, so I've done the very same thing. So we've got a little flute here just as a little bit of a fill rather than a lead. And that's a cashmere loop that I've cut up. And then another flute sample that I found just as a bit of a transition into that next section. And then into this next section we've got a flute stab. And that's playing the D sharp, as you can see there, which is the third of the key. So we're in C minor and we're playing the D sharp, which is the minor third. So that in context with this bass, it's playing a bit of a minor chord there. And then I've got a little flute ambience going on there. That's just a serum patch that I found, Senegal Sessions. And just to add to the ambience of it, gives it a bit of a dark feel, is automating the pitch bend. So we've got it at -5, and then just ever so slightly, we're pitching it down. So that's playing the C, the root note. That little bend down just gives it a little bit of a darker feel to it. Barely noticeable, but it's just a little bit of ear candy that helps give a little bit of life to the song. We're changing the reese into this next section, just making it a little bit darker, a little bit grittier. And we're going from the C sharp to the G sharp again. And instead of going down to the G sharp like we did before, we're going to the D sharp. So we're just adding a little bit of melodic variation there. Super simple reese, 2 saw waves, one with a fine tune down and one with a fine tune up. So without those. And just adding that fine tune gives it that nice wobble. Bit of hyperdimension and a lot of distortion. And similar to the intro, we've got some little percussion hits just to add a little bit of flavour and a little bit of movement. I'm crawling as you're leaving. From technical treatment, I just want you to know it's a part of the thing. So with these vocals in this section, just to fill out the spaces where there is no vocal being sung, I'm just adding a delay throw. So I've duplicated this first vocal channel and just taken down the last word that I want to be delayed and put it down here. And I put a reverb on there that's at 69% wet and then an echo which is at 100% wet. So we can effectively see this as this is the dry channel and this is the wet channel. So it's just a little bit easier to control rather than having the delay plugin on the original vocal channel and automating it there. Just a different way to do it. So we can just have a little bit more control when we do it this way. So this channel is only playing the echo. And this one is only playing the dry. It's a 2:45. I'm crawling as you're leaving. So it just fills out those little gaps in between the vocals, keeps the energy high. It's a 2:45. I'm crawling as you're leaving. From technical treatment, I just want you to know. It's a 2:45. I'm crawling as you're leaving. So we come into the build and we're reintroducing those same hats that we had in the intro. So the exact same thing, it's been copied over, just to help build the energy a little bit. And then we're introducing this flute lead. So this is the same Kashmir sample in the intro that I've just cut up some more to create a melody. So there's a bit of call and response going on. So we've got these hits here, which are playing the C, the root of the key, and then we have the response being this little melody, and then we're back to the call, and then we do another response with a slightly different rhythm to the melody. So the same notes are effectively being played. So the rhythm is just slightly different and helps keep a little bit of interest to the song. So there's a lot of processing on there. And before we go into that, I've purposely left some little clicks in there. So you notice where I've cut up this loop, there are some clicks, which you don't really want in the song because they'll eat up space and it doesn't sound very natural. It won't sound like the flute has been recorded. So the way that we get rid of those clicks is to just introduce these little faders here. So just a tiny bit. So it means that the signal isn't going from 0 to 100 instantly. You're gradually pulling it in, which offsets those clicks. So if we take those clicks out with these faders, and we should have no more clicks. Much better. Sounds better than with the clicks. So with the processing, bit of a low cut. I've got OTT on full, really brings out the highs and compresses it really nicely, levels it out. Got the compression hitting quite hard as well. Decapitator to grid it up a little bit. You've got a reverb, pretty big reverb going on, about 6 seconds of delay. Got a wider, just to open it up in the stereo field. We've got an echo on there, and we're taking the lows out again after we've added some of that distortion. It will tend to add some more low-end information in there. And then we've got an end smile, which is opening up as we're going into the drop. So without all that processing. Just feels a little bit flat, and the reverb especially helps give it a lot of space and fill the sound of the song out a little bit as well. And just as we're going into the drop, I'm not repeating this melody again in this last little section, which is hanging on this C, which just adds a little bit of tension in there and gives it a bit of variation as well. And then with the drums, as we're going into this build, we're adding a 4 to the floor kick. Then we're doubling it. Then doubling it again. And we're doing a lot of automation on this EQ here. So as we can see, we're taking out the lows as we go on and opening up the highs. And then just before we drop, we're allowing the lows to come back in and taking the highs back out. This is what the curve of the high pass looks like. And then this is the low. So we keep an eye on this as we play it. So when we're adding those lows back in, just adds to the energy. It makes it feel like the drop is about to come. And we're doing a similar thing with this break, but we're not adding any lows back in. We're just taking the lows out. And then we're just hitting one clap before we go into that drop. So with the drop, I noticed that LUUDE tends to have a lot of basses going on in his drops. It'll have one main bass or a stab, and then in between it'll have little bass fills. So we've recreated a similar thing here. So we've got a stab and a sub, which are one stacked together. They're always playing at the same time. So the sub is doing all of the low end, and the stab is doing these high frequency stabs. And then the sub. And then in between that, we've got this 808. And then on the third time round, we have this little sub wobble. And you'll notice that at any one time, only one of these basses is playing. So I've made sure to use a utility, and I've automated the gain. So when, in the example of this stab, the 808 comes in, we've taken the volume of the stab and the sub totally down. So there's no overlap from this sub and the stab to this 808. And then the same the other way around. So as soon as this stab comes in, we're taking the volume down of this 808. And then same here, and then exactly the same here. So if we just play the kick and the basses, we can hear that the basses are very well defined. There's only one being played at any one time, and it means that your ear can hear exactly what's going on. There's no overlap, and it also means that your mixes can be louder because there's no low-end information that are clashing on top of each other, so it means you can push it through a limiter, for example, much easier. So this is what it sounds like. So all very well defined. You know exactly what's playing at each time, and there's no overlap in between. What's happening with these basses? So we're doing a very similar chord progression to the Reese in the verse and the build-up of the song. So we're going from the C to the G to the G sharp to the D sharp, but we've got these little bridge notes. So just to make it more interesting. So this would be instinctively what we might do is have them on the downbeats, hitting the root of the chords. But we just add these little bits in here and little changes in the rhythm just to add a little bit more interest. And then the second time round, we're doing a similar thing, but this time we've got two bridge notes. So going from the D sharp to the F sharp to the G. So it's just adding little bits of variation and making it sound a little bit more interesting. And this 808 is following the same notes as well. So when the stabs are playing a C, we're playing a C here as well. And then we're taking an octave up just to make it more interesting again. So the foundation is the stab at the start of each of these chords being played, and then we have these little flicks in between which are helping to accentuate the rhythms and make it that little bit more exciting. So the first 2 times around we have the 808, which is doing the little flicks, and then the third time round the stab is doing the fills itself, and then the fourth time round we have this little sub wobble. So each time we're having a little bit of variation, so we're never getting the same rhythm, and we're not ever getting the same sound at the same time, so it just helps create a little bit more interest. So this stab is a triangle wave, 3 octaves down, and a saw 2 octaves down, and the LFO is doing most of the work. This is affecting the levels of all these parameters here, so it's effectively working as an envelope. So when this curve comes up, it means it's playing at 100% of the volume, and then the volume dies down, which gives it that wham sound, and the filter is doing a lot of this work here. So without the filter, very different sound, and then the same with this distortion. Very weak without distortion and with. And then we've just got a little bit of compression on there and a reverb and a hyperdimension. And the sub is following exactly what the stab is doing, and the sub is literally just a sine wave. So those two together. And because this attack takes a while to kick in, what I've done is taken this delay track forwards 14 milliseconds. So the way you would do this is go to View, Arrangement, Track Controls, and Track Options, and then it gives you this option to bring the whole of the track forward or backwards in time. So if we really accentuate that, so it's playing 100 milliseconds before we're actually triggering it on the MIDI clip, and if you take it behind time, so it's pulling in time backwards or forwards depending on where you set it. So just because it takes a while for this attack to come in, just offsetting that just a little bit by bringing the whole of the track forward a little bit. So it means where this peak plays is more on the 1 rather than it being just behind the 1 like it is here. So every time that's being hit, it just feels like it's a little bit more in time. So it's only a very slight change, almost barely noticeable, but it does make a difference. So when it's at 0, it's just a tiny bit behind time. So I've just brought it forward just that little bit. So this 808 is just from a pack I found. It's a hip hop 808. It's all rounded to square. And then this little sub wobble is 2 analog sines. One's a semitone higher than the other, gives it that real wobble. And then we've got a little bit of distortion on there, a little bit of an EQ, compression, hyper, and a tiny bit of reverb as well. And we're just automating the pitch bend, so it does that. And then this refill is a reese that I found. It's a house reese from Deceiver. Sounds super wide and sounds great. And then for the tops, we've got a fair few breaks in there. I noticed that LUUDE has quite energetic shakers in his breaks. So we've got 2 shakers in there. So this is the first one. And a second one, which is a little bit wider, which is a slightly different sound. And just adds to the stereo field a little bit more. So this is this first shaker by itself. And then I'll add the wider one so you can hear the difference that one makes. So it really opens up the stereo field. And then a couple of breaks. So those together. And then we've got a couple of snares in there as well. One which is slightly higher in the frequency spectrum. So just add in that little bit of crispiness, and then one which is add in the body at the low end. And them together. So all of those drums. And then we're adding this break-in that we had in the build-up, just as a little fill to get into that next section. And with the snare, just to get into the next section as well, we're adding a little bit of a fill. And I've just changed the velocity of these a little bit as well, just so it doesn't sound too on the nose, too like it's been inputted. And then just to add a little bit of melodic variation in there as well, I've got this wobble fill. just before we go into the next section. And that is just a saw wave, and this LFO is affecting the level, which gives it that wobble. So we're at 1/16. So it's just acting on the volume, bringing the volume up and down as this LFO changes. And then I've got a reverb on there that we're automating in, just to open it up as it goes into that next section. And one thing that we've got on this drop, I will quite often put a white noise at the start of the drop, just to give it that bit more impact. Normally I'll just use a white noise sample like this. But this time, just to change it up a little bit, I've done something in Serum, which is just a white noise hum, and then a sine wave, which is being pushed hard through a distortion. So if we don't have that sine wave, it just sounds like a normal noise. And because we're putting the sine wave and pushing it through this distortion, it gives it a real crunch to it that you wouldn't normally get. So without this distortion, so the combination of the sine and the noise going through this distortion really crunches it up. And then I've got an erosion on there as well, doing a similar thing, just crunching it up that little bit more. So it gives a nice bit of impact. It almost sounds like the speaker's at the limit of its capability because it's being driven so hard through that distortion, which I think gives a really nice dimension to the sound. Again, it's super subtle, but it makes a difference in the context of the whole of the song. And there we have it, LUUDE. What an absolute killer producer. He kind of came out of nowhere, and a lot of his tunes he's been doing recently are really, really good. So congrats to him. He's killing it. And so will you after you see this tutorial. Thank you, and see you next week.